Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I'm Jason Baum, and with me, as always, today we have Evelyn Coleman and Marcus Merrill. And today we're going to talk about a topic that's of pretty big importance, I think, to all of us. I think all of us have mentioned before that we feel very strongly about this, making the digital world more inclusive for everyone, accessibility. And, when we're talking about how tech is intertwined with our daily lives, ensuring that everyone can use and benefit from it is super crucial. Whether you're a developer, tester, someone curious about making the digital space more inclusive, I hope that this episode can be for you. And I know that it's super passionate, especially for Marcus, who was our co-lead of, we have an internal ERG at Sauce Labs for accessibility specifically. So I guess I just kind of want to start there, Marcus, not to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. Like, what sparked your passion for advocating for accessibility in software development and testing?
No real clean answer, except that I started reading some articles as a result of some colleagues in the Selenium community who were starting to give talks on this. And I thought, I'm always trying to include more people. I'm trying to pull more people in. And what I didn't realize until I started getting into it is that accessibility, it's just one of the things where, like, you want to include people, and this is a case where it requires actual real work, and that you should want to do it. And so the way I've sort of kind of emerged with like three different points of view on it, which is, on the one hand, you should do it because it's the moral choice, because you should want to help people get to use your software. Then there's the business driven revenue point, where we have a survey out there that basically says that 15% of all web users require some sort of assistive technology in order to get their tasks done. And that of those 15% of people, 65% on a daily basis are prevented from doing their work or getting their tasks done as a direct result of software not being accessible. So you should want to expand your audience by 15% of people, because there's, like, imagine you have a bunch of slices of pie, and this is the circle in the middle, 15% of the circle in the middle of the pie that only you would have access to if only you are accessible among your competitors, or that you are now being excluded from if you're not part of that. So that's the second reason, is business. And the third reason is you're going to get sued if you don't do it. So you can be motivated by morality, you can be motivated by money, or you can be motivated by, you don't want to get sued. I want to protect myself. I want to be motivated by fear, because there are now things called accessibility trolls that are going and finding software that is not accessible, and they're suing the crap out of them. It's happening in kind of a lot of places the way it used to happen with patent trolls kind of early on. Now it's happening with accessibility. So you got three really good reasons. Ultimately, you should do it for the morality reason alone. But if that's not enough, D number 2 and 3. So that's kind of how I got on the topic.
Wow, that's really interesting. That last part, especially, I did not know that. Accessibility trolls, sort of like hackers holding a ransom. Instead of the
Yeah,
ransom, though, they're going to sue you. I mean, that's
yeah.
super
There's
effective.
there's a company that makes software um, for, like, event planning software, specifically around, like, beer and wine tastings and stuff like that. And they have a whole bunch of customers, and someone went after them, and now those customers are kind of left out because that company kind of had to. I don't know exactly what happened in the case. I just know that they were hit hard and they couldn't continue effectively. So it's a real problem.
How hard it is it?
Also, there's a very prominent pizza company who, in 2000, I think 2021 or so, was actually went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that if you make a food product that is, like, for delivery, not having an accessible website prevents people from being able to order. It's exactly the same thing, according to the ADA, as not having a ramp on your brick and mortar establishment. And the Supreme Court ruled that. So your software has to comply now.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a great advancement. I mean, how do you think that the industry's perception of accessibility like has evolved over like the past decade or so.
Unfortunately, I feel like most people are motivated by the fear part. A lot of people are doing it from morality and to increase their guidance, but their customer footprint. But a lot of it is fear motivated. There's these things called conformance guidelines. There's single A, double A, and triple A, and a lot of companies. So single A means that basically some people with disabilities are going to find it impossible to get access information from your site. Double A means people with some disabilities will find it difficult to access information, but there are workarounds. They can get their work done. Triple A is people with some disabilities, like very few people with disabilities will find it difficult. So like we're still going to allow for some problem, but like if you have triple A compliance, you're in good shape. And there's all these tools that can help you sort of determine that. And there's audits that can be done on your software to determine whether it's good or not, you know.
Really interesting. I think I just have this thought that keeps coming through my mind, and I don't even know how to bring it up. But when we talk about accessibility in software, I'm just wondering if there's not enough culture around adding that as sort of a determining point when purchasing software. One thing that I've never heard is, well, we came down to these two competitors and we went with this one, all things being considered, because of the accessibility was there. Or we actually went with this competitor, even though it didn't have everything we needed, because without being compliant for accessibility reasons, we wouldn't buy anything, right? So I'm not seeing that being brought up. And I think it's a huge failing. I want to be talking about these things. I want to be talking about this as part of the buying decision, because if you're buying software, especially if you're a business, you're thinking that maybe your customers or your internal employees are going to be using it, and it behooves you to be able to have those people use it, instead of just leaving people out on the lurch as an afterthought. I guess my point is that everyone should be putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to accessibility. Same point that Marcus was making.
There's a thing that companies will ask for when they're getting a contract. It's called a VPAT, a Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. That's a sort of a standard document that you're supposed to fill out and say like how compliant you are. And I think part of the reason that we don't run into it here is because we don't have FedRAMP, and it's typically government agencies that will ask for this, but it's starting to spread. We're starting to see it more. And it seems like it goes hand in hand with really big enterprise contracts that they'll start to ask for this information early on in the process. And if you don't have it, typically your competitors don't either. So that's not really a choice that has it. We kind of believe that if we were VPAT, we had a VPAT and we were FedRAMP, then we would have access to huge amounts of stuff. But if we had FedRAMP, we'd have to have the VPAT in order to get a lot of those contracts. So I think we're kind of in the wrong side of software game to see that. But hopefully at some point we'll get both of those things and we'll start to see more stuff in there.
Oh, and I didn't mean just with us. I just meant when I'm purchasing anything. It's a really good topic of conversation, because I think it needs to be brought up more. So I guess my challenge to our listeners is, when the next time you're in a conversation about purchasing software, whether it's downloading an app on your phone or your device or your television or whatnot, or you're doing it as part of a business decision, be that person in the room who asks about accessibility.
Yeah, and what I have found is, just real quick, a lot of people who ask about it, it turns out there is someone in their organization that has an identified need for assistive technology, and that motivates the question, but it's not typically yet a regulatory requirement or anything like that, and it should be.
Yeah, it's really too bad that it's not a regular. That's actually where I was going to go with what I was going to say next, was the fact that it's not a regulatory requirement, but the ADA. So in the event industry, like I was in the event industry, specifically working for trade shows, still plan events. I think that is one industry in particular that is extra conscious of ADA requirements, especially when you have big events and you're hosting lots of people. And I guarantee there are going to be people who need to make use of some of those ADA, required things that you have, the ramp or whatever it may be, an elevator, whatever, if there's stairs. I don't understand why it's not requirement. Like, what are your thoughts? Why do you think that is the case? Is it just so new?
It is in some cases. So if you, like I said, food delivery, like pizza, whatever, it is a requirement. I think banks probably a requirement, insurance, healthcare companies, that kind of thing. Like there is a certain class of app, but like games, no. And games is one of those where you just, there's a moral question. There's a revenue, like, am I going to find a new audience kind of question. If your SaaS software and your SaaS software is being used by hundreds or thousands, not millions, then it's probably not going to apply to you, that kind of thing. So it is required in some cases. I think it's not required in some, just because who the heck would enforce it? I don't know. That's my cynical outlook. We don't seem to have, the last couple of executive administrations do not seem to have prioritized this kind of thing in our society. In Europe, they have very much, and it's become, accessibility in 2023 is almost like the GDPR in Europe in terms of its ubiquity. And that's forced a lot of customers and people to be concerned about this. We don't quite have that in the United States yet.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I had to straddle the line there on going political.
Yeah.
No, what I'd be curious about is that top tier, and Marcus, you'll have to remind me, that top tier of certification. Like, I'd be curious if there's groups, like Facebook groups or meetups or just communities out there, that's the right word, Jason, communities, of folks who would have a different opinion about the standards for those tiers, right? I could imagine folks sitting around saying, well, this website's supposed to be top certified, and yet I can't get through it, or none of my friends and I can get through it. Kind of like we were talking about in the gaming industry, sort of with like bugs and whether or not we care to fix certain bugs, or if we get the stamp and then we just continue moving forward. I'd love to hear from some folks if they think that those tiers are on the mark, if they have opinions about what we should be doing, or how a person who's purchasing software who may not need to use those features can still contribute to the way that software gets written to have them.
Yeah. Well, one thing I can tell you just right off the bat is that a lot of accessibility conversations and tooling very much skews towards the bias of visual impairments. So almost every conversation you have is going to be, how can we make this visually obvious? How can we highlight this in a different way? How can we make this, high contrast enough? And those are all biased in favor of visual, whereas there's neurodivergence, there's motor issues, there's does it support the keyboard well enough, that kind of thing. So everyone you talk to is going to have their own version of the high priority rankings for how you should prioritize certain kinds of compensation for certain kinds of disabilities. And I think that ends up making things so complicated that you get right back into the kinds of silos that exist in any other kind of discussion like this, where there isn't a massive profit motivation behind it.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, right? Is that where's the greatest number of people, right?
Yeah.
Who do we want access to? And
yeah,
I think that's maybe that's a jaded way to put it, but I feel like if it's a business, they're going to make a business decision regardless.
For sure, but we're willing to go through some really intense audits for things like SOC 2, right? Where there's things are looked at from all sorts of different angles and get really into the nitty gritty. And we've got other types of certifications where there's long lists of requirements that cover all sorts of different areas, and people have gotten together to decide what those requirements should be. So, I mean, if we're willing to do it for SOC 2, and obviously we'll never be able to catch everything, but I still think that the sky is sort of the limit when it comes to compliance for accessibility.
I agree with you. I mean, I'm just being cynical.
Well, I mean, there are companies out there that do audits for ADA compliance. There's something called the WCAG, and I don't remember what it stands for. Maybe ChatGPT can help with WCAG, and it has a standards set. I think they they either just released or they're just about to release standard 2.2. So WCAG, people say WCAG 2.1, WCAG 2.2. And it has different sort of levels of compliance, and it definitely captures things like neurodivergence and motor issues and hearing, that kind of thing. But like you said, not everyone is expected to meet everything all the time, and an audit will pretty much reveal the holes in whatever. But not everyone is held to the WCAG standard or the AAA standard, the ADA standard. Like, not everyone agrees on what should go in there. It's a standards body, just like any other. So the whole XKCD comic, you remember that one where they say there are 14 standards and they're all different. I'm going to create one standard to unite them all. 6 months later, there are 15 standards. So it's a big, great, big, complicated world, and nobody's really wrangled it all into one place. But the WCAG is a really decent attempt at it, and an audit can tell you where you fit in there. There's a lot of companies that do that. I can plug DQ, DEQUE. They do some really good work in the audit field.
You brought up ChatGPT, so this question is your fault. How do you see the intersection of AI and accessibility kind of playing out in the future?
I feel like, and this is sort of my hot take, not having thought about that much, people should be super careful. There are companies out there, I'm dying to name names, but I'm not going to do it, but there's companies that make what's called accessibility overlay products, where they take an app, a web page, a mobile app, something like that. They take it, not have any accessibility tooling, and they apply what's called an overlay. And they're like, boom, magic, accessible. Yay, go get customers. And now your site's accessible. And these companies their customers are getting sued right and left, because it is an attempt at AI applying itself to conformance standards that are simply too complicated for AI to handle at this moment in AI's evolution. There's a New York Times article. Funny, I was a little bit sad. I was interviewed for the article, but not ended up getting quoted. But it's talking about these overlay products and like how they are opening people up for more liability than they had before. And that, to me, is the danger you get into when you talk about AI. Now, I think it has a role to play. I'm just not exactly sure what it is yet.
I think, Evelyn, you have any thoughts on AI and accessibility?
I just worry about, AI hallucinating, maybe less about, some of the tools that come out through this, but I'm tired of seeing the wrong answers being posted. I'm tired of AI articles. I worry that, AI is going to replace things that absolutely need to be done by a human. I'm thinking of like the apps for the visually impaired, where somebody, it can text somebody or call somebody to go, help them navigate a situation. And, AI replacing that would need to do a very good job, because people's lives are at stake. And it's the same, problems we get into with anything, driverless cars and things. Like the standards, I think AI we should use it. We should include it. We should continue to develop on it. I think the standards need to be very, very high and very stringent in order for it to be helpful. And in the case of using AI for accessibility purposes, we have to get that right, because it's not fair to fail folks who potentially could already be at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Plus one.
Y'all want to hear some examples to look out for, or how this manifests in the world? Would that be useful?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know we're going to have kind of a little shorter episode today, so I want to make sure we talk about this a little bit. So imagine you're on a website and you're on a page, and there's a form that has first name, last name, address 1, address 2, city, state, zip code, whatever. That's a U.S. bias, but I apologize. Imagine you're on this website. Now imagine that you're wearing a blindfold, and you invoke what's called the screen reader. That's going to be something that's made by, probably the operating system is made by Microsoft or Google or Android. Or Android is not a company. Android is Google. Anyway, it's made by the company, and it's basically keyed to do voice reading off of instrumentation inside your web page. So if you have your form is instrumented right, it's going to say like text field first name, text field last name, text field whatever, or it'll just read off those labels. If you don't instrument it right, it's going to say text field, text field, text field, text field, text field, and you'll have no idea which field takes what kind of data. There's also a lot of, so that's one example. Like if you have fields, you need to use what's called the ARIA, A-R-I-A, the ARIA attribute, which will tell the screen reader, this is what this thing is for. And it gives the user context. So that's one thing. That's one real common thing that accessibility scanners could just pick up on. Like you don't have your ARIA attribute set. And there's another one, which is hyperlinks. You see a whole page full of links. And do you want your screen reader to say https://www.
Yeah.
And you don't want that. So giving descriptive links, not verbose links, but descriptive links for the text for hyperlinks. And there's another thing to watch out for is that there's a lot of text which will be displayed in a body, and then the link will say see more, and you click that and JavaScript pops in the rest of the text. So what you see a lot of times is the screen reader will say, you'll say, give me a list of links, and they'll say, see more, ... see more, ... see more, ... Won't tell you what's in the paragraph, won't give you any context around it. It'll just tell you what's in the.
Is that like the most common? Like I've heard that and seen that before. Is that like
these are the most common? Yeah. I'm sort of reading off a list of when I give a presentation on this topic. These are the ones I talk about because these are the ones that are fairly easy to catch and also the most problematic. So it's like if you get a few of these, you're gonna do a really good. You're probably gonna make your stuff AA compliant without much effort. One thing that I think is also important is images need alt text, and I think most people know this. So I don't need to belabor the point. Most images need to tell you what they're trying to describe. It's a diagram or a chart. Here's what they don't need. You have a blog post, and the blog post is about the best way to make ratatouille, just off the top of my head. And in the blog post, there's a picture of a lovely couple sitting at a picnic table. And it's pulled from Shutterstock, and nobody cares about it. But the alt text says, couple sitting in a park with a table with a checkered tablecloth that has a plate and forks and knives and a picnic basket sitting nearby. And you're like, that has nothing to do with the content of this article. Don't include alt text on, stock images that nobody actually cares about. Make the things relevant when you're gonna put them in there.
Wait, are you saying not to put them at all, or should it say like stock photo of two people?
Yeah, stock photo. Yeah, that's probably good enough. Honestly, ask yourself if this actually didn't indicate that there was an image at all. Would anyone lose anything by it? That's the question.
I think you're using a recipe blog is like the worst example, because 90% of the things for anybody, regardless of your abilities, it is going to find everything on that blog really useless, except for the recipe. But maybe this is one of those cases where accessibility tools can actually benefit everybody, because I'm sure there's apps or browser wrappers and plugins, that boil recipe pages down to just the recipe template at the bottom, and this is one of those places where everyone could benefit.
Yeah, makes sense. But you get my point. Like blog post, Shutterstock, whatever. Don't over annotate those images. So color contrast. There is a way to measure color contrast using software. And if your contrast ratio is too low, like 3:1 is kind of low, meaning you have gray on darker gray or slight light green on light blue, that kind of thing. The contrast is not high enough for people to be able to see it. And so you want to go like a really big and there's tools out there that can measure it. I don't remember the name of the one that I'm using right now. But you want 4.5:1 for text so that you can actually really make it pop out, that kind of thing. TPGI.com, I think, is one of the places where you can get tools for this kind of thing. Then let's see. I've got a couple others here if you want to hear some more. Here's one that I hate. Target practice when you're using a mouse. There's a lot of times when there's a big field and there'll be a radio button or a checkbox next to that field. And nowadays, most sites, when you hover over the entire row will slightly change color. And then when you click the row, it will select the checkbox. But there's still some holdouts out there where you have to click a 5x5 pixel radio button. And I lose my mind every time I have to do that, because you've got a great, huge number of probably literally thousands or tens of thousands of pixels you could click on. You're making me click on this tiny little box right here. Drive me insane. I actually have a preference also, although nobody does this. I like text fields that you're typing into to be a monospace font. So I don't have to, if I'm trying to get between the I and the L, I don't have to just like, I have a 2-pixel radius I can click within. Nobody ever does that, but I really wish we would start doing that. So anyway, these are just some of the ones I just wanted to throw out a few of theirs that you can all sort of go look at your software critically and start to think about.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Marcus. And we'll probably need to do a follow-up episode to this one, I think, diving into even more of those, because I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And maybe some tools and things like that.
Yeah, some real experts in there too. I mean, I'm still a layperson, no matter how much I talk about this.
Sure you are. So modest.
No, I mean, really, there's certifications, there's stuff, but I am truly, by definition, a layperson. I have no ego about that.
Well, appreciate your educating us on the topic, and thank you so much to you, Evelyn, also for participating in the discussion. And it's something passionate, I think, to all of us. And I don't want to speak for you both, but since we're closing out the episode, I will. Accessibility isn't just a feature, it is a right. I think that's kind of the message. And I think that people who are developing software need to understand that. I think many do, but many more have to. And we'll get there. It's a process. It's a step forward, and we'll get there. Hopefully, if you've caught this episode and you weren't thinking about it, now you are. And that's one thing that we could do to put some good into the world today. And thanks for joining us for this episode. We will catch you again next time when we'll talk about another great topic to be determined, but that's how we kind of roll. This has been Test Case Scenario. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.